Shalom, shalom. All praises, honor, and glory belong to Yahweh, Bashem, Yahushai, Bashem, Kodash. Double honors unto the elders and to the apostles of Great Men Stone. And salutations to the hopefully elect. Alright, the men that are pushing this word out in truth and in sincerity. Alright. This is your brother Yakal coming at you with another lesson through the Spirit and power Yahweh, Bashem, Yahushai. And this one is inspired by this article, right? Published today, actually, or earlier today, December 24th. And the title is Shoppers Swarm Georgetown, Vendors Complain of Slow Spending. Alright, it says and when I first read the headline, I was thinking that maybe it's just that a lot of people are waking up to the falsehood of Christmas, and maybe that's why a lot of persons didn't come out and shop, right? But as a read the article, it's going into something completely different, right? So let me get some of this. It says, on Christmas Eve, while the streets of Georgetown were full of shoppers, vendors were complaining that spending has dropped drastically over the past 3 years. Alright? So a lot of persons aren't burdening themselves with the expense of Christmas like before. Especially over the last 3 years. Alright, because really and truly that's what Christmas is. Alright? It's a burdensome expense, especially on the blacks, Latinos, and natives, the so-called blacks, Latinos, and natives, which are you Israelites. All right, because you don't have the money, all right, to really and truly participate in Christmas. All right, and two, it's not really in your spirit. It's not within the spirit of Israel, to partake in the customs of these other nations. It says many vendors overstock their businesses, hoping to make some extra earnings over the Christmas holidays. But in Georgetown, some vendors said that the Christmas buzz has fallen flat when it comes to sales. So persons aren't spending money, and then two, it could be right, and then just think about this, it could be where the control over where people spend their money as far as the government and larger cooperation goes. You're seeing a greater shift, so now persons aren't necessarily going on the road and buy, but rather they prefer to go into these big stores, into these malls, the Macy's and the Bounties of the world. All right, that's their preference right now, you see. But that's just a segue, right? But it goes on to say, Dylan Allicock, who has been selling apples, grapes, nuts, and biscuits in the city for over 40 years, told News Source that the business has been extremely slow, and he believes it's the worst in the past 3 years. Between last year and this year is the same thing. We're going through and more harder this year. We're not getting business. If you have a box of apples, you're only getting half box sell for a day, Allicock told News Source. Alright, so the vendors, which we call them the small man, they're crying out. Alright, that business is just slow. Alright, and Christmas, is usually one of those seasons where a lot of persons are able to earn more. Alright, I remember when we were younger, alright, myself, my older brothers, sisters, we used to go in the stores, purchase stuff, and then go on the road and sell. Alright, and we used to make a extra money, right? Because the hype and the buzz behind Christmas was that heavy, you know. But we seeing more and more that Christmas is well dwindling down. Persons are being enlightened, you know, about the true origins of Christmas, and they're no longer burdening themselves with the expense of it. You see, here it says, um, he said, while many persons may be out shopping, it appears that they can't afford to make big purchases that in previous years. People, while they stretch their hand into their pockets to buy things, they say they can't afford it. They got to come back. They are saying the price control for these things have gone very high. People can't afford it like before. If they could have buy $500 apple, they studying when they buy that tomorrow what they eating. All right, so now persons are being put in a rock between a rock and a hard place, so to speak. All right, where they gotta choose whether or not they gonna fall into the hype of Christmas, of having these lavish feasts and these decorative tables of apples and grapes and uh, walnuts and so on. All right, between choosing that and having enough to eat tomorrow, you know. All right, it goes on to say, um 40 years we selling out here and we used to find it easy. Now it is very hard. For Don Drayton, who sells household articles along Regent Street, business has not been good for the season and even slower for the past 2 years. For the season, the whole season, it wasn't as we expected. I think it's because the people don't have money, you know, and this inflation in Guyana is ridiculous. All right, the inflation is in Guyana is only getting worse, and a lot of people are sleeping on it. They're not paying attention to what exactly is going on with the inflation. All right, we've seen where things are tripled, quadrupled. All right, in price. Right, but we understand that it's not the value of the item that has increased, but rather the spending power of the dollar. All right, but we're seeing that bread that was $260 Guyana dollars are now what, $400 and $500. All right, that's almost that's 100%, or almost 100%, or over 100% in some cases. Depending on the brand, the quality of bread. All right, it says Paul Shuram echoed similar sentiments. Salakia. It says because the people don't have money, if the government pay people their salaries, the back pay, or things that they really need, money that they have, that they're supposed to get, it would have been better. At least whatever percentage, it would have been better. Drayton explained. All right, so this vendor is basically saying that, look, hey, people don't have the money. Government hasn't paid persons you see the double pay. All right, and these things. All right, which is causing um you know yeah, persons not to have the funds to spend. All right, it says yeah, so far for the season, it is little it little slow. Yesterday it picked up, and so today we still seeing what going on, but the business slow and nothing ain't doing. It has been really tough. He said sales were much better. He said the high cost of living is taking its toll on people. Cost of living is high, apples and grapes, everyday things going higher and higher. And then plus we cash grant. If we did get we cash grant, it would have been better, but at least thank the Most High for life. We still surviving. Alright? And that's another trap, you know, that the government ultimately put persons in, you know, which was what? To convince them that, look, they would have received a one-off cash bonus, you know, into their pockets for this Christmas. All right, it was a part of the campaign tactics and everything, you know, and a lot of persons really and truly planned the entire last quarter of the year with that in mind. All right, that they would have received a cash grant, you know, to splurge this Christmas. All right, and the fact that that didn't come true, a lot of persons are now left in a hole, literally, right, where they would have spent money recklessly, made purchases with the expectation that they would have received that cash grant, you know. But hey, such is the way of a serpent. All right, the scripture say what? That maybe not the scripture, but there's a saying that say, well, a promise is a comfort to a fool, you know. It says, he said next year he may have to change the course of his business. Another vendor, Keisha Jones, said she is simply thankful regardless of the situation. Well, we have to give the Most High thanks and praise for whatever little we get, because nothing ain't going on, she said. According to her, citizens were hoping to get the 100,000 cash grant, and now that they have to wait until 2026, there isn't much to spend. All right, so a lot of persons, like I say, put that in mind and structure the entire last quarter of the year, you know, with the hopes of receiving that. All right, it says some say that they are waiting on the cash, and they didn't get the cash grant, and others must be holding back their money for next year, she said. Off camera, many vendors complained that the business was extremely slow, with many blaming government for not issuing a second tranche of the 100,000 cash grant. But cash grant or no cash grant, many said they were all set to celebrate Christmas with their family and friends. News source also caught up with Shawana Campbell, who was overflowing with excitement. The Christmas treating me real nice. Well, of course, when we collect the penny bank money, we start the shopping. I get a couple of things, and I'm so happy for that. All right, you know, you're gonna hear a couple of scriptures, because a lot of people gonna continue to, for one, put their trust in this man, in the government, right? Yeah. So this is Isaiah 30:1. It says, "Woe to them that go down to Egypt for help, and stay on horses and trust in chariots, because they are many, and in horsemen, because they are very strong. But they look not on the Holy One of Israel, neither seek Yahweh power." All right. And why I read this precept is because a lot of persons trust in Egypt. All right, which in this case is America. But I wanna, you know, make the correlation that, hey, this actually go back to your government too. All right, because your government is operating in the ways and customs of Egypt, aka Babylon, aka America today. You know, so a lot of they go down to Egypt and trust in Egypt. They trust in the government. You know, which Egypt is was synonymous with bondage. And hey, look at the way that your government treats you. All right. Now, let me get. This is let me see. This is Sirach, chapter 13. Yeah, Sirach chapter 13 and verse 2 says, burden not thyself above thy power while thou livest, alright, and have no fellowship with one that is mightier and richer than thyself, alright. So the scripture say not to burden yourself above, thy power, and a lot of persons over the years, that's what they would have done, alright. And people probably did it this year too, where they would have burdened themselves with the expense of Christmas, you understand, above what they could actually bear. A lot of persons literally go into debt, right, or however you want to pronounce it, trying to keep up with whether it be the neighbor or friends and family for this season, having these big elaborate decorations and Christmas trees and Santa Claus and all these different bullshit. So scripture say, what, burden not thyself above thy power while thou livest, and have no fellowship with one that is mighty and richer than thee. For how agree the kettle and the earth? For if the one be smitten against the other, it shall be broken. Alright. Let me see. There's a next precept, I believe, in the same chapter that says, not to be tied to the expense. I think it's the same. Not to be tied to the expense thereof. All right. Yep. Give me a second, bear with me. Yeah, this let me see, tide. Yeah, this is Sirach chapter 18 and verse 32. It says, take not. Yeah, let me read from 30, right? Just to give some context. It says, go not after thy lust, but refrain thyself from thine appetites. Alright? And that gluttonous spirit, just jump on you during this time. Alright? Shit. That's one of the spirits that, that is going rampant during this season. Where everybody want to eat until they literally have a stomach ache. It says, if thou givest thy soul the desires that pleaseth her. Alright, and the appetite there is not specific to food, right? It just goes into your desires. Alright, and but in the essence of the topic, that's why I gave the example of the food, right? It says, if thou givest thy soul the desires that pleaseth her, she'll make thee a laughing stock to thine enemies that malign thee. It says, take not pleasure in much good cheer, neither be tied to the expense thereof. Alright, so the scripture say what? Don't be tied to the expense of what? Too much cheer, and they present this season as the season of Charlie, of so much joy and peace. Alright, and they get it all wrong, because for one, the Lord, alright, who they ignorantly call Jesus, he wasn't born in the dead of winter. All right, go through the scriptures. He wasn't born in the dead of winter. You know, and this season has been, corrupt and further corrupted. As time progressed, because now you got persons, you know, incorporating Saturnalia and Krampus. All right, and they're showing you this in the movies plainly, that this is what the season is about. Recently, a couple of years back, they had this movie with The Rock, where he had played in Health. All right, yeah, and it was going into, Krampus basically being the brother of Santa Claus, which, we all know Santa basically go back to Satan, all right, which is what, the deceiver, all right, yeah, or Salakia, adversary. The word Satan go back to the word adversary, right? It says, go not after thy appetites, but refrain thyself from thine. Salakia, go not after thy lust, but refrain thyself from thine appetites. If thou givest thy soul the desires that pleaseth her, right, she will make thee a laughing stock to thine enemies that malign thee. And a lot of persons, they become laughing stocks, because they try to live a life that they can't afford during this time, with the lavish spending and eating, buying all sorts of gifts for people that they really don't care about. All right, the Christmas parties, all sorts of bullshit. All right, it says, take not pleasure in much good cheer, neither be tied with the expense thereof. And that's the point. There's a great expense, literally, monetary wise, but also at the end of it, is death and destruction. It's death and destruction. It can only lead you down, the path of death. All right, so yeah, so Lord's willing, this scripture, this quick lesson was edifying. Giving our praises and glory to Yahweh Bashim Yahushai, Bahar Rakah Kodash, Shalom.